All right, this is the Algebra 2 Unit 4, Lesson 5 video. It's Pro Unit 4, Unit 5. No, that's always confusing. This is the Lesson 5 video over imaginary and complex numbers. So, when we talk about imaginary numbers, that's where we need to start. An imaginary number is a number that comes from the fact that we don't really have an answer for something like this. We know, for instance, that the square root of 9 is equal to 3, right? We understand how that comes about. Whoa, sorry about that. We know that the square root of 9 is 3 because 3 times 3 equals 9. But also negative 3 times negative 3 equals 9. So actually it would be 3 or negative 3. We know that. But imaginary numbers say, like, well, what is the answer to this? And the answer is that there actually isn't what we call a real number, but we do need a way to mathematically address this issue of what is the square root of a negative number. So what do we do with this? Well, there's a solution. The solution is that we will first break up this into the square root of 9 and the square root of negative 1. And we will be able to simplify the square root of 9 to 3. But this number we are going to replace with this constant term that we're going to call I. And so this would be rewritten as 3I. So the takeaway here is that you need to understand that I, the imaginary number I, is equal to the square root of negative 1. And that is kind of the foundation of everything that we're talking about here. So let me just get out of full screen mode here. There we go. Sorry about that. Out of full screen mode. There we go. And so that is kind of the big concept that they're starting with here, is what an imaginary number is. In other words, we know that the I squared is equal to negative 1. So that's kind of a kind of second level of that you need to know. Okay, so beyond that, they're really just giving you this brief introduction to this idea. And so we'll just kind of keep going here and talk about what a complex number is. And all a complex number is some combination of imaginary and real numbers. So a complex number takes the following form: A plus BI, where A is the portion that is real and BI is the portion that is imaginary. So in any complex number, the first term that doesn't have the I, is the real portion, and the B is the imaginary portion. So first things first, you have some vocabulary, numbers 1 and 2, and then starting in number 3, you're going to be combining real and imaginary numbers together to make a complex number that is in this form. So your answer should look something like, so for instance, if I was told, okay, you have a real number of a real portion of 4, and you have an imaginary portion of negative 2i, then the complex answer to that, the way to combine that would be 4 minus 2i, and that would be the complex number for that. That's what you're doing in number 3, number 4, number 5, and then in number 6, identify each as real or complex. The key here is whether or not there's an I squared, because remember, I squared equals negative 1, and so that actually isn't a complex number. So that kind of gave you the answer there, but that's cool. And then lastly, we have to talk about how to solve. So if we were going to solve equations that lead to complex answers, it would be something like this. So let's say I have x squared plus 49 equals 0, and we want to solve this equation for x. Well, we're going to subtract 49 from both sides. None of this is new, it's just basic algebra. So we end up with x squared equals negative 49. And so this is where we run into a problem. We can't take the square root of both sides because there is no square root of negative 49. So what happens is x ends up equaling, and we break this into parts. We break it into 49 on one side, and we break it into the square root of negative 1 on the other side, which ends up being 7 and I. So again, what's happening here is this is reducing to 7. This is being converted to I. And so the answer would be plus or minus 7I. Always plus or minus. Anytime you take the square root of something, your answer is going to be plus or minus. And so that's what you're doing here. You should, in each of these cases, get to this stage of the process, and that is where you are going to introduce the I into the mix. So at this stage in the process, when you've split this up into parts, that's where you're going to deal with your I in. So 7 is that way, 8 is that way. Number 9, you do not need to solve number 9, so skip that, and I will fix that on your lesson. Don't worry about it. The rest of these are review questions. You can head back to some previous videos. I'll tell you this is from Unit 3. This is, I'm not sure, but I think Unit 2 for composites. And then center of the ellipse comes from this portion. The answer for that is 0, 0. I'll just give you that one. We didn't actually do that lesson. So that's your answer for number 12. That's it for lesson 5.